marks a significant year for South Africa. The country commemorated 40 years since the Soweto uprisings that was a pivotal moment in defining South Africa's future democracy. It is also the year in which the nation celebrates the 20th year of its constitution. The CNBC Africa team visited one of the most iconic locations in Johannesburg, and indeed South Africa, Constitution Hill.
We're standing on the Constitution Hill precinct in the area known as the number 4 prison, and the specific area that we're in is the isolation cells in number 4 prison. Number 4 prison was the prison that held black male prisoners. Also on the site we have the original building at the top of Kutsa Street, which is the Johannesburg Fort, built in 1892, originally as a fort to defend Johannesburg, but later turned into a prison for white male prisoners. The only black prisoner that was ever held in the old fort was Madeba, who was kept there to keep him separate from other political prisoners. And then the third prison that we have on the site is the women's jail, which housed black and white women, and a lot of our very famous political prisoners were also incarcerated there, along with ordinary criminals and people that were arrested for things like pass laws and stuff like that. This site was chosen by the constitutional judges to be the site of the new Constitution's court. And the reason for that was because nowhere else in the country was there a site that told such horrific stories about our history. And what better place to actually put the beacon of light, which kind of shows our human rights progression that we've made and our beacon of democracy, our constitutional court, than putting it on what was then known as Hospital Hill. So the site has now become known as Constitution Hill, and it consists now of the 3 prisons, number 4, the women's jail, the old fort, as well as the Constitution Court, and then the area in front of the Constitution Court, which is called Constitution Square. The towers that you see on Constitution Square are the remaining tower blocks from the old awaiting prisoners block, and the third tower of that is actually inside the Constitution Court. So it's a living precinct. It's not just a museum. It's a space where the history of our future is being told. So it's the awful atrocities of our past being demonstrated through the way the buildings have been maintained and kept, so that you can see what they actually look like and the conditions, the horrific conditions that people underwent when they were incarcerated here, to this beacon that we have, the beacon of light of our Constitution Court, with the towers of the waiting tower block having built. We had these huge light towers built on top of them, which when we switch them on at night, these lights shoot up into the sky, just showing what a beacon of light this site has become.
The original prison was built in 1892. Almost a century later, the site was closed down and relocated in 1983.
We don't exactly know why they decided to relocate, but the prison was relocated and the site ran into a complete state of disrepair. Vandals came in, they started stripping the buildings apart, and it was only once the Constitution Court judges made the decision to build a Constitution Court on the site that the decision was made to turn this into a human rights precinct, which is what it is today. The number 4, as you see it, you can see it hasn't been restored. It's just been what they called when they did it, the stop the rot. So they kind of stopped it from crumbling anymore. But the important thing about it is we want you to see how horrific the conditions were. So number 4 has not been restored in that sort of way anyway. The way you see it is the way it would have been. Obviously some of the pieces and some of the buildings have disintegrated. Number 4, the women's prison, that has been renovated to a large extent, but certain areas have been left exactly how they were. There's always this contrast between what we fixed up and what it actually looked like, to show you that. And the same thing with the fort. The fort is in the original condition, it's just been renovated. These buildings are protected in terms of our Provincial Heritage Act, and they're about to be awarded National Heritage status, so we can't actually do anything to tamper with them from that perspective. One of the buildings which was pulled down is there's a huge square that we call Constitutional Square in front of the Constitutional Court. Now, what you see in the waiting trial block that used to be built there, or was built there, was pulled down because we needed to create the square. So what you see is those two beacons, which are the remaining two towers of the waiting trial block, and the third tower is actually in the Constitution Court. And these are left to commemorate what actually happened in those spaces. And one of the exhibitions that we're working on is actually an exhibition to kind of commemorate and tell the story of the waiting trial block as well.
Walking around the site, there is a feeling of disbelief and utter angst that overwhelms us as we are reminded of the inhumane conditions and torture black prisoners suffered. But the distinct sound of children on a playground at a nearby school transforms those emotions of horror into pride and contentment. Many of these prisoners are now celebrated heroes who achieved something that changed history in such a remarkable way. Today, Constitution Hill is constantly abuzz with all sorts of events taking place, attracting both local and foreign visitors alike.
One of our key things, being a site that is in the inner city of Johannesburg, surrounded by a hillbrow, is to actually engage with our local communities. So there's lots of stuff that happens. You'll find that even if you're sitting watching ruling in the Constitution Court, you'll notice through the windows that create the transparency, people constantly walking through to the site. So the site is designed in such a way to make it transparent, which is what our Constitution is all about. We also have events on the site, so we have a number of very unique venues that people can rent for conferencing facilities, for different events. The Women's Jail has a conferencing facility, as well as the Old Fort. But then we also do a lot of events to attract younger people. So there are things like our Basha Uhuru Festival, which is happening at the moment. Earlier this year, we have what we call our annual We the People Walk, which uses the facility. So there's a number of different types of events. So, you know, there are lekgotlas, dialogues that are responding to current issues that are happening in the human rights arena. Exhibitions, the permanent exhibitions as well as temporary exhibitions. We do film screenings both inside and outside. We have a restaurant facility, and we'll be opening a new restaurant facility on the site in a couple of weeks. So it's really a place that we'd like to encourage all South Africans to come to. I think every South African needs to come to the site because it's the only place that really tells the history of our future. So it looks back on this awful, gruesome past that we've come from. You can see the places where many of our political leaders were incarcerated. And then you look forward and you see our Constitution Court, which is really the beacon that we hold so dear going forward.
With June being Youth Month, the Basha Uhuru Freedom Festival has inspired dialogue and creativity amongst Johannesburg's youth.
The Basha Uhuru Freedom Festival is an arts festival that happens every year to commemorate the youth of 1976, and the festival includes a variety of art platforms such as exhibitions, a music concert, various critical dialogues that we host for young people to come and talk about current issues that affect them as youth. And the exhibition itself is a group exhibition which entails photography that is taken by students that attend sort of photography classes at the Market Photo Workshop. So they were given a brief to interpret or reimagine what it means to be young in South Africa 20 years into the Constitution. So the result was the body of work that you see in the exhibition. We are opening up the prison walls for young people to come in and have a space, a safe and creative space where they can talk about issues that affect them, where they can express themselves in a creative way. So in a space that has a history of pain and brutality and oppression, we are inviting those young people back and saying it's now a space of expression, it's a space of creative dialogues. It's a space where you can come in and express yourself without being imprisoned within the prison walls. So the idea is to break down those prison walls that imprisoned those young people of 1976, because this is where they were incarcerated when they were arrested in Soweto. So we are bringing young people back into that same oppressive space, and we are saying that the walls that once imprisoned you as the youth are now blank canvases where you can express yourselves and have meaningful engagements and meaningful dialogues. There's a subconscious awareness, of the struggle that the youth fought for, or the struggle that the youth were involved in 40 years ago in 1976, because we see a similar kind of struggle and concerns and a similar kind of movement taking place in the streets of South Africa. As I mentioned, there was the fees must fall. There's now a call for the curriculum in South African universities to be decolonized, and these are similar issues that the youth of 1976 were facing, issues around language policies in education, and it's the same kind of struggle that's happening, the same kind of dialogue and conversation that recently took place in the universities around the country, such as Rhodes University. We saw the same protest taking place at UCT. So I would say that yes, young people are aware of the 1976 issues, but I would say that even if they are not directly informed or aware of what happened and what was the significance of that struggle, I think somehow inherently they are aware, they are subconsciously aware, and those issues are inherently part of the issues that they are facing today.